Okay, I'm back. Like I was saying, black women and girls did play onto colorism and the light skin hierarchy. When I was in high school, it was during the same time and era that colorism was kind of being talked about. People were talking about it. Girls did notice the rejection of some men, of some boys not wanting to date them. Black men wanted the light skinned girl. But for me, at least for my own case, I really just like girls that would like me, even though none of them like me. But I had, most of the girls that I liked were actually dark skinned. The first, no, actually the first girl I liked was dark skinned, and the last high school crush that I had was also dark skinned. I think I only had really one light skinned crush. It was really like only like one girl that I liked, and sadly nothing ever happened. But it wasn't really a big loss for me. It was like it was a whatever. I kind of knew better anyway because she was a girl that dealed with street dudes, and I knew that I wouldn't fit the mold of her type. And so I did move on, and I liked this dark skinned girl who was a cheerleader. She didn't like me. Me and her got into it, and we just leave it at that. But in at least what from my perspective or what I saw, it seemed that girls didn't have problems attracting boys or even older men. You know, um, Granted, during the same era, when same time there was this whole black men wasn't shit um, trend or slogan being passed around, and even though it's been there for decades, it finally reached my generation. And so you would have black women saying that black men weren't shit, and most likely it was in response to falling in love with Tyler Perry movies. It was the same time um, Medea's plays and Tyler Perry movies were hot, and it was like an A essential in the black community to watch. And I did notice that black girls were saying like, "Hey man, all these niggas ain't shit," and I felt kind of weird because it felt weird to me because I didn't know where I fit into the spectrum. Granted, I am a dark skinned guy, not the darkest person in the room, but I didn't fit into the spectrum because I wasn't the coolest guy in the room, and the common problems that girls were facing was cheating, lying, all that stuff. Basically cheating. And I didn't have a dating record back then, and a lot of girls knew that, and I was ignored or invisible because to a degree I looked like I came out as the well-to-do black boy who could rewrite the image of black men. They saw that. I remember when I was in the same time in high school, my English teacher came up to me and told me like when I graduate from college, I will get tons of girls begging to be with me because black women love educated black men. And just like Sarge, there wasn't women begging to be with you. And I scratched my head too, trying to figure out like why would they say this to me now, knowing knowing that they assume that I will be successful, I'll be this and that. Like, why don't they just be with me now, in pre-success? It's not like they're expecting me, or it's not even like they're waiting themselves. They're still dating bad boys. They're still dating guys who will do them wrong. And they knew I didn't fit the script, but I guess because I was like in a completely different lane, and they were just like, screw, he's too much. But anyways, during the same time, black women were also getting hit with or being exposed for their self-hatred in their hair. And this is when a lot of people were talking. This is when like the weave thing became a problem for black men. Everybody, black men were asking for natural hair and all that shit. And you had a lot of pushback from black women who were like, it's just hair. It doesn't matter, blah blah blah. And then Chris Rock did a documentary exposing that this whole concept of good hair is a $1 billion industry, and Koreans are making a stink load of money, with processed hair and shit. And then it was exposed of what happens to black women when they don't keep up with their hair. You're seeing mold and the crust, and you see all this kind of weird shit to where the weaves kept in too long, and they don't know how to take care of their own hair, this, that, and the third, blah, blah, blah. And you also had the exposure of black women with selective breeding, into where, black women, even though they weren't really ready to get with white men during the time, they were trying to get with mixed men in hopes of getting some type of, some type of physical traits from, their mixed spouse, or their light skin, or their Afro-Latino mate, in hopes that, hey, they'll get the good silky hair. That was like a big problem with black women, was that they didn't like black boys' hair. And it was this big push to soften it up, or this get like to maintain baby hair for boys. And if you ever noticed a black mother with a mixed child, especially with a boy, pay close attention to how long she will let that hair grow. Now, I remember like last year I ran across a woman who was with a white Italian guy, and like her baby looks like a regular black boy, but the hair would like throw you off because his hair is like long and silky. And she let that thing drop. But anyways, during that time, there was black mothers were selective breeding in hopes that their kids come out a little lighter and softer features and this, that, and the third, green eyes, and it was one thing for like black men to be on bullshit, like, okay, we're just gonna date light-skinned girls or whatever. And really, when it comes to some parts of colorism, it is subjective, because it's like who's light skin, who's really dark skin, like what counts, what shade is this, blah 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 blah. But it's more damning when you hear women talking about they're trying to create designer babies. And I can remember the craze over mixed babies, and how black women were all over these mixed baby Facebook groups and interest pages and all that shit. It was, it was the exotic babies with blonde hair and blue eyes and olive skin or whatever. And, they like these kind of mixed match, not really white, you know, whatever. And then we had the skin bleaching thing, and I really do feel like the self hatred that black women have for themselves it weighs more on black men. Like black men will only get in charge with the sexualness. But the thing is like even when like I said before, with the sexual selection or selective breeding, that's a whole other thing. There isn't black men like in America at least, in Africa or the Caribbeans, I can see it, but I don't see it in America to where you have black men who are known to want and to procreate with mixed babies. I mean, procreate to have mixed babies. Like, there's no. I, to be honest with you, I only see it when it comes to black kids, both girls and boys, failing the doll test. And they're seeing that the light baby is the good baby, the dark baby is the bad baby. That's the only time I see that. I do feel like boys tend to kind of fade away from the doll test results faster than girls because they realize that being a dark skinned man has perks. I'm not gonna say privileges. I would say perks. We don't have privileges, but there's perks when it comes to how dark skinned black men are perceived in media. You have the hypersexuality. You have like the Tyrese Gibson and these dark skin, ab, six pack, sweaty, greasy, dark skinned black men, and you see them in black and white photos, and the EJ is like they just look like gods to you. And black men, I think black boys kind of wrote off of dark skin the negativity perceived by dark skin once they saw rappers and they saw themselves more in media. They were seeing themselves in good and bad portrayals, so they didn't really complain much compared to the what dark skinned women have to deal with when they're usually the token black girl or the overweight or the jealous dark skinned friend, and we can talk about colorism in media, all that stuff, whatever. But I keep forgetting about what I wanted to talk about, the selective breeding, because I wanted to bring up our college classmate that I had who actually had a family who practiced selective breeding, and this was when I was a freshman. This was like literally 5 years ago. This was like literally 5 years ago during the summer, where it was in biology class, and we were talking about dominant and recessive genes and hybrid. What was it? What do you call it when? I know there was a term. I want to say it's hybrid, but I don't think it is. But it's a term where the alleles, they don't really have a dominant. They can't form a dominant or recessive gene. Like, it's not like one or the other, because they have to make. I think it's called incomplete alleles or some shit. Incomplete dominant. But it's basically like this is mixing colors. Like, if a black person mixed with a white person, it's not like 100% white versus 100% black. It's like it just kind of, it's random. It can go either or. You can have a Barack Obama versus a Quincy Jones' daughters. It can vary like that. But this woman was talking about her kids and her family tree, about how she's biracial, and she has a white husband, and she has these kids who are like lily white. I never seen them, but she describes them. She talks about how she would go to Walmart, and she would always talk about how white her kids were. It was really weird. It was really weird and annoying. And she would just talk about how white they were, and how she would go to Walmart and people were surprised that those were her kids, and they were like, but they're blonde, they have blue eyes, how can that be? You're a nigger. They would be like that and shit. And she talked about like how she described her family tree, and it was really weird because it seemed like they were these like Creole family, and like the family like one side of the family would break down, and like they would get with white men for a few generations. They'll switch to black men, and like it's like, okay, like I think like her sister is with a black man, but she's with a white man. And the way it sounded, it seemed like they just kind of do selective breeding, where it's like you date white men to get lighter, and then you get with black men to even out the gene pool or whatever. It was. She just comes from a really weird family, and yeah, that was really it. But I do feel like there is a big hush when it comes to black women practicing colorism. I feel like it's a little bit more toxic than black boys, but I guess it's underappreciated. It's not underappreciated. It's not talked about. We don't talk about it too much, but it's there, and I think uh, what was it? I think it was either Light Girls or Dark Girls talked about this when, and you'll notice this with Caribbean and African mothers, most likely Caribbean, where you'll have the dark-skinned grandmother, and she praises the mixed granddaughter, and and I remember a college friend of mine. She told me the same thing about how, and I don't think she's of Caribbean descent, but she told me the same thing of how her grandmother didn't like her because she was dark skinned, and she preferred her. She preferred her like her niece, like or some other grandchild, some other light skinned mixed child over her, and it made her feel some type of way towards her grandmother. And I was like, okay. And like when you talk about these stories of these family colorisms, and it was funny when I heard Kerrison talk about the same thing about her grandmother, ironically, about how her grandmother is telling her biracial granddaughter that you're gonna be Miss America, and she and the granddaughter didn't understand that, like and I guess in the granddaughter's response of like telling her mom that I didn't do anything to earn it, rather than just kind of agreeing and saying like, yeah, I want to be one day, like like most kids would say. I guess that Kerrison is trying to kind of undo the damage of colorism, and you know give her conversations and talks about it. But like I said before in other videos about colorism, is that I think I did this in my video, what light skinned women aren't gonna do. And if light skinned women have a chance to get a role, whether it's a demeaning role towards dark skinned women, they will take it. They're gonna take it. It's, they're going to take it. There's really nothing that they can really do or say that will undo the damage that in colorism, whether they did it intentionally or not, or whether they did it or not. Because like just like with the old light skinned girl who plays in Underground, she was talking about colorism and how in Hollywood, and I was like, it's kind of weird how she's talking about trying to dismantle colorism. And it's like your presence and your show is colorism at its max. Your show is just basically dark skinned Moses running around with mulatto you, and you're his prized possession. It's like we see all these kind of beautiful, well kept mulatto house girls, and we see these kind of sweaty, didn't age well, dirty, dark skinned black slaves. And yeah, it's a reality, but you know the kind people can charge that show to the game of colorism. And you think is like you don't know, or you might have known that, like, hey, what if a dark skinned girl tried to get your role and you got it? Like, how would you feel if that happened? You couldn't control. You're not gonna say, oh, I'm not gonna take any roles because I see this dark skinned girl and she may deserve it more than me. It's a dog eat dog world. People are gonna take the opportunities that are given to them. And so Kirsten can try to fix colorism by herself, and have her daughter be the exception to the rules, but it doesn't do anything. It doesn't fix anything. And it's kind of funny what Sarah talks about Kirsten's mixed daughters, but I kind of think about, like, and Sarge talks about it too, about Kirsten's son. Where does he fit in? Where, what does he learn? What does he have to do to appreciate black women? I'm kind of eager to know, what goes on in the household when it contains to him. Like, what does, her son feel about seeing Philando Castile being shot and killed, and no justice, no peace? How does he feel about Black Lives Matter? How does he feel about Obama being biracial and being perceived as a nigger terrorist, Muslim, blah blah blah, and hated, and seeing white people have dolls of Obama being lynched and burned? Like, how does he feel with that? How does he feel when it comes to seeing white hatred, for black men and biracial men who, and I'll just say biracial men in general. So I'm eager to see that. It's not just about the sexual attraction. I'm eager to hear that, because it's obviously, and I said this in another video, and I said this in a Sarge video too, on a comment, that it's kind of funny when Kirsten talks about exchanging cultures and interracial relationships, and I scratch my head thinking, like, okay, what are black women who follow Kirsten? What are they going to exchange? They, there's like music, these women already bitched and moaned about colorism and misogyny and light-skinned women taking over, blah blah blah. And so it just kind of confuses me. Like, okay, like, for instance, I'll be more specific. Like, what does Kirsten's son do that is like black centered? Like, does he play basketball? Does he play sports? Does he have, does he watch the NBA? Is he, who's his favorite artist? What type of music does he listen to? And, when I was doing like an old Sarge video, I made a comment, and I was saying, like, man, like, what does Kirsten teach her son about black culture? Is he, Kirsten's talking about exchanging cultures, and, like, I wonder if, her son is going to not Bedside, Compton, or, a black area, a black community center, and he's playing, basketball with the neighborhood kids. Like, is he thinking about going to a HBCU? Is he going to the Kappas and Alpha Step show? Is he inspiring? Is he debating with himself on whether he should be a Kappa or an Alpha or a Sigma? Like, is he having those discussions? It's kind of out there, but I'm just saying, you know that I'm just saying. But anyways, I feel like the focus on black men's colorism is a little bit too deep, and it gets into the point of like we're the bad guys too much, and people forget that we've learned this shit somewhere. We learned this shit from the church. We learned this shit from our mothers, our grandmothers. We learned this shit not out of the blue. So, granted, all these boys were raised by single mothers, just like Sarge said. I'm not gonna blame women all on them per se, but I'm just saying. These boys failed the doll test for a reason. What is going on in that household? What is he hearing? Is he hearing how much of his dad isn't shit, and his mom calling him a black ass nigga and all this shit and making fun of his dark skin? I probably, black boys are affected by it. But I probably say that, like I said before, is that media, gives black boys the pushback to enjoy their dark skin because, they're seeing these dark skinned athletes with beautiful women, not just women in general, but you assume that your dark skin will attract white women, and that all these light skinned women are attracted to your dark skin and your masculinity, and black women don't get the same type of pushback or whatever. But that's my video. I ain't got much else to say, but if you like what you hear, subscribe. I'm not gonna beg people to like my video, but if you feel like there's an angle that I missed when it comes to colorism affecting black boys, I would like for you to comment.